Hi folks, HR Funk here, with part 2 of my mini-series on essential cartridges. If you saw part 1 of this series, you know that in that one I focused on handgun cartridges, and at the beginning of the video I mentioned the fact that as we are ever more inundated by new cartridges coming out from the various manufacturers, each of which is supposed to be better and better than the last one that they offered, it has caused me to think a little bit about some of the cartridges that have historically served us, and in some cases very well for decades, that get very little attention. And in this two-part series, I'm looking at these cartridges and giving a little bit of attention that they are probably long overdue for. Some of these cartridges have been serving for defensive purposes, some of them have been serving in the hunting field, some of them have been around for target use, and some of them have served in all those roles at one time or another, to include even military service. So I'm looking at these, talking a little bit about their history, and these are the cartridges that I think if you own firearms chambered for them, they're going to serve at least 90% of all your shooting needs, if not more like 99% of all your shooting needs. So here we go with my essential rifle cartridges. And the first cartridge up this time around is going to look very familiar if you saw part 1 of this video. It is the exact same 22 long rifle rimfire cartridge that I showed first in that video, but from the longer rifle and carbine length barrels, the diminutive 22 becomes a little bit more tenacious, and in fact it becomes an excellent small game cartridge. It's very good for close range varminting. Because of that greater energy and greater velocity, it can also be pressed into, dare I say it, defensive roles, and due to the very good accuracy from some 22 loads, it's also very good from rifles like my Ruger Precision Rimfire back here for both formal and informal target shooting. So this is an extremely versatile cartridge. It's one that everyone should have a firearm or multiple firearms chambered for. And oh, by the way, it's also a lot of fun. So what more could you ask for from an essential rifle cartridge? Number 2 on the list is the 5.56 by 45 millimeter NATO cartridge, or to use its civilian/sporting nomenclature, the 223 Remington. This load was originally developed in the 1950s as a military cartridge, and some years later, Remington released it for sporting purposes. And just as I said a couple of minutes ago with the 22 rimfire, this is an extremely versatile cartridge. It can be used for anything from varminting to mid-range game hunting, depending upon the load. You have to make sure you use the right load for what you're doing. It's also capable of extremely good accuracy for target shooting, both formal and informal, out to ranges of 500 or 600 yards, or beyond, depending upon the skill of the shooter. And you can generally find a 556 millimeter load or 223 Remington load for just about anything you want to do, with the exception of big game hunting. So again, this is an extremely versatile cartridge. It is wildly popular. Usually you can find it just about anywhere, and usually the price is pretty reasonable, although as we've seen in the past year or so, that does change depending upon the political climate. So in any case, the 223 Remington / 556 by 45 millimeter NATO is number 2 on my list of essential rifle cartridges. Next up is a cartridge that hunters and shooters have been relying on for 125 years, actually over 125 years. Originally released in 1895, the 30-30 Winchester has been used for just about every conceivable shooting duty that there is. It is an extremely good cartridge for hunting, particularly medium to close range hunting, for deer-sized game. Also, it can be used for just about any other type of shooting that you want to do. I wouldn't use it for extreme long range shooting, but for general shooting duties, whether it's eliminating varmints, again at medium or relatively close range, or deer hunting or anything like that, the 30-30 Winchester is again an extremely versatile cartridge. There's a reason that it's been around for all these years, and it still performs its duties just as good now as it did back in 1895. So the next one on the list, as I said, is the 30-30 Winchester. Next up is a cartridge that hails to us all the way from back in 1906, originally known as the U.S. 30 caliber cartridge of 1906, and later the name was simply shortened to the 30-06. This cartridge does just about anything you can reasonably ask of a rifle cartridge, except maybe very large, dangerous game hunting. With the right load, the 30-06 is great for target shooting. It's great for big game hunting. You can use it for varmint hunting. It's going to be somewhat of an overkill, but hell, people use 50 caliber BMGs for varminting sometimes, so the 30 caliber, or the 30-06 rather, is certainly not overkill to that extreme. Originally chambered in rifles just like my model 1903 Springfield back here, and eventually chambered in the legendary M1 Garand rifle. The 30-06 cartridge has been with us for a long time, and I really had to do some soul searching to choose the 30-06 over its younger brother, the 308 Winchester. And I went back and forth, and what I finally decided was there's nothing that the 308/762 NATO cartridge can do that the 30-06 cartridge can't do just a little bit better, except allow itself to be chambered in slightly shorter and slightly lighter rifles. So for that reason, I did opt for the 30-06. Again, it's an extremely good, extremely versatile rifle cartridge, and definitely one that deserves to be in our Essential Rifle Cartridges video. For the next part of this video, I'm going to change directions a little bit, but there's a reason for that. When you get above the power level of the 30-06 cartridge, you start to get into a lot of cartridges that are more specialized. They're intended for bigger, dangerous game hunting or long-range target shooting, or maybe military applications, all of which are fine if someone is involved in that type of shooting. But for essential cartridges, for most shooters, if they're not involved in that type of shooting, those cartridges aren't really going to have an application for them. Which brings me back to something I talked about in the first video, and that is handgun cartridges. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about pistol caliber rifle and carbines chambered for the 357 Magnum cartridge, which I discussed in the first video, and the 44 Magnum cartridge, which I did not discuss in the first video. And the reason I didn't talk about the 44 Magnum and label that as an essential handgun cartridge is because for some shooters, the recoil generated by the 44 Magnum out of a handgun is going to be a little bit much to manage. But out of a rifle, like my 1894 SS back here, most shooters are going to be able to tolerate that recoil out of the heavier firearm. Now, it still does have a little bit of recoil, but again, I think most shooters of average size are going to be able to manage that recoil. Out of the 1894 back here, chambered for the 357 Magnum cartridge, this is a very easy cartridge or cartridge and carbine combination for most people to be able to shoot. Even with the stoutest 357 Magnum ammunition, this really doesn't generate all that much recoil. And depending upon exactly what type of shooting you're going to be doing most of the time, that will dictate which one of these cartridges is going to work best for you. If, for example, you're going to be shooting medium to medium-large game and you want the most power you can get, obviously that's going to be the 44 Magnum cartridge. And out of the 20-inch barrel of my 1894 SS back here, this 240 grain bullet is traveling about 1,700 feet per second, so that's no joke. That's a good, potent cartridge for just about anything you might want to shoot with it. Similarly, out of the 16-inch barrel of the 1894 back behind, the 158 grain bullet from this 357 Magnum cartridge is going to be traveling about 1,600 feet per second. So again, you get a lot of oomph, and I know people who have taken deer with a cartridge and rifle combination or carbine combination just like this. So, and that does depend on some things like, shot placement, obviously, and some other circumstances, but you can harvest deer cleanly with this combination and do so without a great deal of recoil. Now, another nice thing about rifles and carbines chambered for this particular combination of cartridges is that out of the 44 Magnum rifle or carbine, you can also shoot 44 special ammunition. Similarly, out of the 357 Magnum, you can shoot 38 special ammunition. And particularly with the 38 special out of the 357 Magnum rifle or carbine, the recoil impulse is extremely mild. And if you have younger shooters or shooters who are recoil sensitive, you can use this rifle and cartridge combination, the 38 special combination I'm talking about now, and help them learn to shoot. And also, even with something like plus P38s, a good defensive load, it's not going to generate enough recoil that most shooters aren't going to be able to manage that. So if you have someone who is recoil sensitive, maybe has some physical ailments of one type or another, and they have some difficulty controlling the more heavy recoil, generated by something like a 357 Magnum cartridge, you can put a good plus P 38 special load in here and have very good effectiveness, because again, the 38 special is also going to gain a good deal of velocity out of this longer barrel and probably hit with about the authority of a mid-range 357, even though it's not going to generate that much recoil. One of the things too that I've noticed talking about shooting specials out of these is out of my 1894 SS back here, the 44 special cartridge seems to be very, very accurate out of this rifle, and you would think just the opposite would be true. You would think that since the bullet has a greater distance to move before it engages the rifling, that you would lose some accuracy, but just the opposite seems to be the case with this particular rifle. I seem to get very, very good accuracy out of this rifle with 44 special ammunition. So again, because of their extreme versatility and because of the wide variety of different loads that you can get, the ability to handle the recoil much more easily, everyone should have a rifle or carbine chambered for either the 44 Magnum or the 357 Magnum cartridge. And last up, everyone should have what I call a thumper. A thumper is a large bore rifle cartridge like the 4570 Government here that's intended to put large holes in things before they can put large holes in you or potentially take big bites out of you. If you want something a little bit more modern, I also have my 444 Marlin cartridge here. These are both ballistically similar with a slight edge going to the 4570, which has been doing its job since about the 1870s. Again, both of these are very good. They are not long-range cartridges by any stretch of the imagination. They are for up-close and dangerous encounters with large game or, again, maybe dangerous people. Either way, they're both going to do a fantastic job. Also, if you want to use them for hunting other things that aren't quite so dangerous, they'll work equally well for that. And there you have it, folks. Those are my picks for essential rifle cartridges. I'd like to hear yours. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you purchase from Optics Planet. Also remember, warbirdbunker.com is making t-shirts for the channel. If you go to warbirdbunker.com, you can find my t-shirts there, which are being discounted right now. I think they're now $15.99. If you go to warbirdbunker.com, you can find my t-shirts there, as well as all of Nathan's other firearms and patriotic themed gear. If you use my discount code at warbirdbunker.com, which is HRFUNK4U, that'll save you 10% off your entire order from warbirdbunker.com. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.